Good day, I'm Derek Fildebrandt. Today is September 1st and you're watching The Pipeline with the Western Standard. I'm joined today by our Alberta political columnist, Cory Morgan. How you doing, Cory?
Very good, thanks.
I'm also joined by a special guest today, Western Standard British Columbia contributor, Reid Small, out in Vancouver. How you doing, Reid?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
Dave Naylor is away on vacation today. So Reid has been doing yeoman's work, helping fill in on the news department. We've been a bit short-staffed, so we appreciate everybody's patience you've shown with us, but we're working hard trying to stay on top of election coverage here. Before we get in, I want to thank all of our current Western Standard members for your continuing support and encourage those of you who are not yet members to go to westernstandardonline.com and click on membership. You can try it free for 15 days. See if you like it. The Western Standard is bailout free. We refuse to accept Justin Trudeau's media bailout, and we need people to step up to support genuinely free press, private sector media. So we'd be grateful, and I think you'd enjoy it if you give it a shot for 15 days. Try your membership. If you don't like it, you can cancel it. So we'll get into the show here today. Today we're going to be discussing the curious case of Banff-Airdrie, a very curious race shaping up there. Conservative incumbent Blake Richards taking a lot of heat from his right flank with Derek Sloan, the People's Party, and the Maverick Party all coming at him. We're going to discuss, in that context as well, Maxime Bernier of the People's Party and Jay Hill of the Maverick Party. Words between these men, not very friendly right now. And of course, we're going to get into Aaron O'Toole's balanced budget plan, or I should say his plan to have a plan. We're going to get into that. So let's start with Banff and Airdrie. So that's a constituency, for those of you not from Alberta. Banff-Airdrie is a constituency immediately west of Calgary, stretching all the way to British Columbia. And it goes a little north of Calgary into Airdrie, of course. And there we've got a very interesting race. Blake Richards had some ungodly sum total of the vote in the last election.
71.4%, I believe.
I thought it was more. I thought it was into the 80s.
No, but
71.4?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It's still pretty healthy.
No, so not too crazy for conservative in rural Alberta.
Yeah.
Okay, so an absolutely solid lock of a conservative seat. The Conservatives could run Satan himself there, and most people would still vote for the Conservative candidate. Having the blue sign is a big advantage in that constituency, I'd say. But we've got a very interesting race shaping up there. We've got, what's the name of the Maverick candidate?
Tariq El Nida.
Who you've just interviewed. I think we're going to have that up soon after the show.
We'll have that up in a little while, yeah.
Yeah. So Tariq, he is the Maverick Party candidate. Very interesting, self-described Arab redneck. I've never seen a guy. He's a very unique candidate for the Mavericks there. Definitely getting a lot of attention. Just the profile of the candidate himself. We've got Nadine Wellwood for the People's Party. She ran last time. That was the People's Party's second best showing in Canada after Maxime Bernier. Still wasn't too high, but it was their best showing outside of that riding. And then Derek Sloan. The election was called, and Derek Sloan has vacated his seat in Eastern Ontario and said he's running to make Alberta great again in Banff-Airdrie. Interesting race, Cory. Try to help us make some sense of this mess.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think all of these alternative parties, of course, you really want to target an area where the biggest defense against anything you're going to run is that there's going to be vote splitting. And a person can very clearly point to, I mean, the Liberals, the NDP, rarely break 10% in that riding. So you don't have to worry about vote splits there. You could run 5 Conservative candidates. You're still not going to get a Liberal or an NDP person in there. So they've really all focused on that. Now, we've got that splitting going on. So yeah, each has their little bit of turf, and they're kind of unique within the Conservative movement. I mean, Bernier is really playing to the smaller government, personal freedoms, the libertarian approach. Derek Sloan, unapologetically socially conservative. I mean, he's got a church-based support going on out there. He's been parachuted from Ontario, though, and I don't think he's going to be very well received. Tariq is running for the Maverick Party, and he's a strong, bright character. Knows the issues. He's coming from the regionalist point of view with Jay Hill, and yes, we have Nadine Wellwood in there. This is her second run at it again. Another smart, well-spoken candidate, knows the issues. These aren't just names on ballot. They're all out there. They're campaigning hard and heavily, and the leaders are now on the ground and getting pretty hot and bothered with each other as this campaign progresses. So it's quite interesting to watch on a riding that normally would just be a boring lock.
Well, unfortunately, I think it's probably still going to be a lock, probably just a little less of a boring lock. I mean, it's just hard for anyone who does not have the Conservative name beside them on the ballot to be able to win in Alberta. Albertans, I think, are more conservative than the rest of the country on aggregate. But, there's people equate conservatism with Conservative Party. And I don't know. I'd be pretty shocked if anything changed there. I just think his insane margin of error might come down a bit.
It'd be unlikely, but it's a spot where one of these guys could really make a mark and establish themselves, though, and these parties really need to do that right now.
Yeah. Reid, do you think there is any chance of anything other than the conservative incumbent Blake Richards getting reelected in this riding?
I don't think so. I think, as you said, you're going to see more votes shifting towards these alternative parties. I think a common dilemma people face is whether they want to vote strategically or whether they want to vote purely in line with their values. And I think, the last 18 months in particular, a lot of people have sympathized more from a value perspective with, for example, Maxime Bernier or the Maverick Party. But I still think that it's going to be, there's not enough people that are going to shift in that direction to make a real significant difference.
Well, if there is a vote split taking place, it's actually probably between the PPC, the Maverick Party, and Derek Sloan.
Well, I liked how Bernier said it. Maybe O'Toole swung so far left in emulating the Liberals that there'd be some splitting between O'Toole and the Liberals. But the Liberals were pretty insignificant in that riding.
Yeah. Okay, well, we're going to continue on in this vein, kind of in this intestine warfare on the right here. But before we do, I want to thank one of our sponsors, the Canadian Coalition for Firearm Rights. The CCFR is a fantastic group fighting for your right to own, buy, and bear firearms responsibly in Canada. They're actually doing really important work, particularly right now. Today, the Liberals released their platform, and they keep on trying to take away my military-style assault rifles. I don't know. I don't recall buying any military rifles or assault rifles, but they're coming for them. They're now promising extra crackdown. They have this buyback program, and essentially nobody has taken the government up on it. I got my letter in the mail that says, Derek, your guns are now illegal, and I took it and wiped my arse with it, as I think most people did. Is that a good image?
Not really.
No?
But, you were complaining of stomach upset, so I'm just getting all sorts of...
Yeah. So the CCFR, they're doing great work right now, doing advocacy work. I think the Liberals are probably a lost cause when it comes to gun rights. They're doing what they can within the Conservatives. The Conservative platform on firearms is better than the rest of their platform.
Not bad. They've taken up a bit of a good defensive stance for us there, but still.
Yeah, it's not solid, but it's at least significantly distinguishable from the Liberal platform. They talk about undoing this reclassification, arbitrary reclassification of firearms that just banned guns randomly because the Liberals think they look scary. Banned all sorts of funny things like the
paintball guns.
Some airsoft guns, yeah. Also, the Panzerfaust anti-tank guns.
Shit, I forgot.
I didn't know I could buy one before. That's what I'm upset about, is that I didn't buy my Panzerfaust before they outlawed it.
It'd be great for clearing the snow off the driveway.
Oh, wonderful. So anyway, the Canadian Coalition for Firearm Rights is doing great work, breaking down the parties' platforms on this stuff, lobbying parties to be as unterrible as possible, and they're quite effective. So check them out at firearmrights.ca. Click why join to learn more about why you should become a member of the CCFR, the Canadian Coalition for Firearm Rights. Okay, speaking of people who like guns, Maxime Bernier and Jay Hill. So we had, we were just talking about Banff-Airdrie. It's kind of a microcosm of things. It's particularly crazy because they got Derek Sloan in the mix as well. But Bernier and Hill, they are not on the best of terms right now. Maxime Bernier, actually, you did the interview with Maxime Bernier in the studio here. And he had some words. Why don't you tell us about these words?
Well, yeah, he referred to Jay Hill and the Maverick Party as being the Muppets of the Conservative Party of Canada, and just wasn't very kind about that run. And Jay Hill was actually Bernier's campaign chair in the past, I believe, back in 2019. So they were close. There's certainly been a rift between them now. And they both feel, I guess, entitled to really make a full go of that riding, but neither of them clearly is going to back off. So the war of words is just escalating.
Yeah, it's odd. Bernier had, I like Max. I supported when he ran for conservative leader. I share a lot of his values, but he seemed a little off on a few things. He did accuse the Maverick Party of supporting mandatory vaccination. And that one had me scratching my head. I know our Dave Naylor, our news editor, he called Jay Hill, asked for some response to this stuff, and he was pretty categorical that no, the Maverick Party does not support mandatory vaccination. I don't know, Reid, does it?
Well, when I
Max,
heard him,
Mad Max is, he is maybe a force of nature when going after. Opponents to his left, the Liberals and the Conservatives and the NDP, but why do you think Max would be saying stuff like this about the Maverick Party, which is, well, ideologically pretty similar, is obviously more regionally based?
I think it's, it sums up our current time pretty well. The most people that should be ideologically aligned are now at each other's throats. So it's not surprising to me. What is surprising is that he didn't exactly come correct with his facts. And I was surprised when I heard that, because I had never heard anyone in the Maverick Party mention support for mandatory vaccinations or mention anything about being in favor of strict lockdowns or anything like that. So the fact that people who should be like-minded are at each other's throats is not surprising. But what is surprising is that he just obviously didn't do his homework on that, or let emotion get the better of him in that moment, and just threw that out there without really knowing.
Mm-hmm. Cory, I'd be shocked if either the People's Party or Maverick won any seats in the West this election. I mean, I suppose Max has got an outside chance in his own seat in Beauce in Quebec, but I'd be pretty shocked if either Maverick or PPC managed to successfully win seats out here. I think they're going to get a fair number of votes combined, but I'd be surprised if they win seats. What do you think is driving this kind of enmity between the two?
I think, they're fighting for the same base. They're fighting for the same people. They've got some differences, but they've got to create some wedges to try and draw from that one pool. They do know that. Strategically, they realize that they're just going to dice this three ways if somebody doesn't come out. So they're getting a little rough in their play with it. If you think of the base of people, and they've got some pretty solid bases they can tap into. There are some people who are very dead set against getting vaccinated, set against vaccine passports, restrictions. And the PPC has been very effective in reaching out to those groups of people and drawing them in. Meanwhile, we've got some people who are very dedicated to regionalism or even soft secessionism, and the Maverick Party has been grabbing that chunk out of the CPC because they've been very weak with the carbon tax and in standing up for Alberta. If those two groups were actually combined into one vote, that might be a real significant chunk bitten out of Richard's support. Again, enough to disrupt him and cost him a seat? Probably not. But it's really not going to look as significant if these two or three Conservatives really duke it out and keep splitting that discontent Conservative vote.
Yeah. All right. We're going to go to O'Toole on the budget, but before we do, I want to thank another sponsor, Resistance Coffee. And actually, I always put this straight to Cory, since Cory is the Resistance Coffee drinker.
Yeah, so you can tell my hands are really shaking from the coffee I drink. Though they have the Empty Promises decaf, which I should actually indulge in more, so I won't be quite so wound
Cory
up.
Morgan decaf, so it's still strong.
Yes, still strong, but maybe I'll be a little less nasty on Twitter if I will wind down on the caffeine a little bit, but I don't really want to be. But these guys are great. Yeah, I mean, it's a non-woke company. You know, it's nice to see the counter-woke coffee company out there not trying to virtue signal. Well, I guess maybe they are, but they're doing it on the other end of the spectrum. They're giving 10% of any of your purchases to causes that stand up for your rights, like the JCCF, which does have John Carpay back at the head and working really hard. I mean, those guys are busy as all get out, standing up for the rights of Canadians right now. They give 10% of your purchase towards that. They got some fantastic coffee. They ship right to your door. If you order over a certain amount, we know because we ordered enough, you get free shipping. It's quick. It's within a couple days. It's good coffee. And if it's your first order, you put Western Standard all in one word in the promo code and you'll get another 10% off. So 10% goes towards a good cause. 10% comes off the price. You get good coffee. You'll keep ordering from them, I assure you.
Sounds like a plan. All right. So viewers will recall right at the beginning of the election, I think first day of the election, first full day of the election at least, Aaron O'Toole released the full Conservative platform. In it, there was a promise to balance the budget over a decade, and he said, just hold on, we're going to have the costing for you. We're going to tell you how we're going to do it. And yesterday, well, Aaron O'Toole did release some words, 225 words, which was a roundabout way of saying, well, if you elect us, we will then create a plan that plans to balance the budget. So they have a plan for a plan to balance the budget. Absolutely zero numbers. I have never seen, in the history of the Conservative Party of Canada, under Stephen Harper, under Andrew Scheer, provincially, you see Doug Ford, Jason Kenney, even if their numbers are a little bit questionable at times, they at least release some semi-plausible numbers about how they're going to add up all the cost of their platform commitments, how that's going to fit into the budget, and how that will balance the budget theoretically over time. Aaron O'Toole will do us no such courtesy. He's just said, trust me, if you elect me for 3 majority consecutive back-to-back-to-back governments, I will have a plan to balance the budget. Cory, how seriously? Should we take this seriously at all?
I think he might want to go for it, but the thing is, right now, if he puts any kind of costed plan together, one thing that none of the major party leaders want to admit, if you're actually serious about balancing the budget, is you're going to have to use the C word. And not the C word some people might be thinking of. I'm talking about cut. Don't add a letter to that. And that is something that they don't want to get into, because then that gives a target. If there's any area that he's going to reduce spending, the Liberals are going to go and they're going to fearmonger with whatever that group is that the spending reductions are going into. So he's put out, as you said, a release that has 5 statements of fluff that are talking roundabout way for doing it, but they will not get into the nuts and bolts of what actually will have to be done if they seriously actually want to balance that budget.
Yeah, it seems to me that he is going to, if he was to win, he'd have to lie one way or another. Either he's going to lie and not balance the budget, or he's going to have to lie and make spending cuts, significant spending cuts to balance the budget. What he's got now has got a 0% chance. And also, I suppose he'll never be held accountable for it because he would need 3 majority consecutive back-to-back-to-back governments. And as I've said before, the last Conservative leader to do that was Sir John M. Macdonald in the 19th century. So I'm not holding my breath that he'd even have the chance to do it. Reid, do you think this is actually going to be a problem for O'Toole, or do you think Conservative voters are going to just give him the benefit of the doubt and say, well, it's not as bad as Trudeau, I suppose?
I think some people will do that. Another thing too is he said that he's going to balance the budget without cuts to public services as well. But as you guys said,
balancing the budget.
as you guys said before, there's really no real data to look at, nothing to really showcase how he plans on doing it. So will some people vote for him? Of course. I think most people will vote for Aaron O'Toole just because the thought of Justin Trudeau getting elected again is just too painful of a thought. So, yeah, again, I don't really know what to say about that because there's really nothing to say.
Where's the beef?
Where's the meat?
Justin Trudeau's not even promising to theoretically balance the budget, although there's something a bit more honest about that, because there is a pretty much 0% chance that Aaron O'Toole will balance the budget. He's not going to get 3 majority consecutive governments, and no party has ever balanced the budget over 3 terms. In Canadian history, it's always been done with a promise to do it over a single term. That was Jean Chrétien with his finance minister, Paul Martin. As terrible as they were on many fronts, they were actually pretty good on the budget. They made spending cuts, balanced the budget, and they did it in 1 term. Stephen Harper, when he got his majority government, he did it in 1 term, although he created the deficit to begin with. But his plan to balance the budget was done over 1 term. The problem is that if you're not going to, at the end of a term, you have to be able to go back to the voters and say, okay, that was tough. We tightened our belts, we made some cuts, but here's the result. We've balanced the budget. Now reward us for those tough decisions. Well, how are you going to make tough decisions and 3 times go back to voters and say we still haven't got the results? It's not going to work politically. It just doesn't. So today the Liberals released their full platform, as I mentioned earlier. Absolutely bonkers stuff. $70 billion in new spending beyond all the new spending they've already made and is already budgeted to be made. It's bonkers stuff. But I'll say this one little bit of credit for the Liberals. At least they released some numbers. They gave us some numbers. They're bullshit. They're not going to add up. They're never going to stick to it. So don't think for a second that I'm hailing the Liberals for coming up with some concrete plans. But at least they released some BS theoretical numbers to make it add up. Whereas O'Toole's is just, you know what? I'm not Justin Trudeau. And trust me, I'm not even going to do you the pretense of giving you some BS numbers. It's wild. All right. Well, on to Trudeau.
C word again. Oh.
What's C word?
None. Don't worry about it. Something popped into my head there.
Put it back in.
Okay.
All right. So when Justin Trudeau called an early election here, we all knew it was coming. We could see it coming from a mile away. But the Liberals were riding fairly high in the polls. Things have tightened up. The NDP have gone up, largely at the expense of the Liberals. The Conservatives have come up pretty much exclusively at the expense of the Liberals. PPC has come up. It's, again, probably not to the point where it wins seats, maybe outside of Bernier's. But it's hovering 4, 5, sometimes even 6%. It's now registering there. But the polls are still much closer now than they were when the election was called. Trudeau's significant lead has evaporated. Most polls have the Conservatives roughly 1%, sometimes 2% ahead of the Liberals, pretty much in the margin of error, but they're consistently on the upper side of that margin of error. Still very far from a majority government at this point, potentially in the position to win a plurality. But right under these chances, I mean, there's still a good chance of a Liberal minority, but it appears no chance of a Liberal majority if these numbers were to hold up to Election Day. Cory, do you think Justin Trudeau is regretting having called an early election?
I think at least they're regretting the strategy they took, which was really astoundingly bad. I mean, Canadians never like going to the polls. That's nothing new. And when it's an early election, usually, though, they go to the early election, everybody grumbles and gripes about it, but 10 days later, they've forgotten about that and they're back into the policies. But Trudeau came into this and then releases his policies halfway through the campaign. You had 2.5 weeks of other parties being able to say, you're holding this election for nothing but your own purposes, and he had nothing he could point to say otherwise. Like, if you're going to call an election, if you're going to dissolve the parliament early, whether minority or majority, usually your strategy is going to be, look, we've got a plan that is so important, so profound, that we have to take it to Canadians to get them to give us a mandate on it.
The Jim Prentice strategy.
Well, it doesn't always work, but I'm just saying you've got to have something to point to, right? A reason to say, this is why I'm taking you to the polls. Yeah. This is what it is. and we're going to talk about it for the next 5 weeks, and please put us back in. But he came into it just basically saying, look at my hair, we're going to have an election, give me a majority, I'll make the world a better place, but I'm not going to give you specifics as to why. And they've just pummeled him on that for the last 2.5 weeks. This is an election about Justin's vanity, an election just to get himself a majority. And Canadians don't see that as a good enough reason in a time of crisis to head to the polls.
Reid, it has seemed like Justin Trudeau called an election, but didn't really know why. He didn't have a good reason when he stood in front of the cameras to say, this is why I'm calling an election, other than, well, Canadians need to give a government a mandate to make big decisions right now. There really didn't seem to be any reason for it. The NDP was very comfortably propping up Justin Trudeau on anything, even on corruption issues that weren't a left-wing commonality ideological issue. It was the NDP just didn't want an election, and the NDP was supporting the Liberals no matter what happened in Parliament. Do you think Justin Trudeau's had any difficulty? Has he had a lot of difficulty in framing a ballot question about why we're voting and what question you should be voting around?
Well, I think him calling the election was essentially a Hail Mary because he knew his popularity was reducing, and I feel like this was sort of a last attempt before things got really bad. Because I really do think 3-4 months from now, a lot of things are going to come out about Justin Trudeau and some of the decisions that have been made over the past 18 months, and he would have had no chance of getting reelected. So I think this was essentially a Hail Mary, and it may have. Well, I mean, he's being literally everywhere he goes, he's being mobbed by angry protesters and run off the streets. So I think he was a little bit late in doing so.
Yeah, I mean, we have an article up today from Lee Harding, our Saskatchewan correspondent. He was interviewing Barry Cooper, a longtime professor at the University of Calgary. No. He was interviewing a different professor. He had 2 different articles with professors. That's why I'm a little mixed up. He interviewed, I forget his name, but a professor from the University of Manitoba. And his theory in this article was that all this stimulus spending, we're now about to have massive inflation. We already have inflation setting in a significant way, and it's only going to be getting worse. Taxes are going to have to go up to pay for this stuff because they're clearly not going to cut spending. That we're probably headed for some very difficult times now. That things are not going to be. We're not going to be building back better. Things are probably going to be a lot worse on the other side of this for some time to come. And that so his theory was that Justin Trudeau wanted to get ahead of that bad news, called the election to have it done now, so that when you're not voting in a year from now when things are probably tougher. Do you think there's much to that?
There definitely is. I mean. That's part of why I think they're just spending or promising spending with wild abandon. They feel like they got nothing to lose at this point. There's people. I mean, Justin might not be the biggest, luminary in the bunch, but there are some smart liberals back there, and they know that there's an economic freight train coming down the tunnel, and you can't keep borrowing like this without consequences coming. So if you could refresh that mandate and weather that storm with 4 years of a majority, they were willing to dive in and try and get it, but they might not have done the right choice here.
I fear it's correct.
I think
we want to thank you all for joining us today. We also want to especially thank our members.
Reid was just about to say something.
Oh, sorry, Reid.
No. There's a delay. So I was just going to say regarding Justin Trudeau, I think his only chance at getting reelected is to focus on the emotion, the cultural emotion surrounding COVID and climate change, because you can kind of tell by his tactics recently, he's pitting people against each other, and he's really focusing on this us versus them narrative. And if he can create enough emotion and enough division and hatred in society, then I think he'll be able to sort of rally his side, get them emotional enough that they're not really analyzing what he's saying. They're just like, it's about, we got to go after, the unvaccinated versus the vaccinated. I think that's what we're going to see him focusing on. And I think that's the big thing over the next couple of weeks.
We're going to have to, we need to do a segment on where did all the pro-choicers go? Where did all these people go who say, my body, my choice, and the government's got no right to regulate it? With the very rare exception of people like Cory, they've disappeared. They've just gone completely dark. Justin Trudeau, avowed champion of right to choose what to do with your body, has now become one of the most viciously authoritarian leaders when it comes to telling us what we can do with our bodies. Quite something. I think I think that's a segment worth doing on itself. Well, I want to thank all of you for watching and all of our members. If you're not yet a member of the Western Standard, go to westernstandardonline.com and click on membership. You can try it free for 15 days. If you don't like it, after you can cancel it any time before that and get a full refund. We'd be very grateful for your support for Bailout Free Media. I'm about to burp. So I think we need to end the show here before we have any uninvited sound effects. So Reid, thank you very much for joining us today from beautiful Vancouver, and Cory, thank you for putting up with pre-recording burps.
We need a studio with windows that can open.
I'm too cheap, not happening.
All right, thanks.
Thank you very much. God bless.